Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this video is going to be about connecting to databases in Node. A lot of people, like, this can seem like a very sort of like magical thing that you can do. It's like, oh, how do I connect to a database? And then oftentimes they'll think of it more narrowly, like, how do I connect to a database in Express? How do I connect to a database in Fastify? Technically, when it comes to those minimalist frameworks like Express, Fastify, Koa, there is no way to connect to a database. You connect to a database, and then you can use your connection in those frameworks. So the same way I connect to Mongo, if I was building an Express app, is the same way I would connect to Mongo with a Fastify or Koa app. So oftentimes you have to think the building of a web server is a separate task than the connection to a database. Now, some frameworks kind of make it seem like it's all one neat package. Like when you use like what's called batteries included frameworks. So on JavaScript, this would be things like Sails, FullTS, Nest.js. They kind of have like the database piece kind of assembled there for you, is because they packaged it for you, not because they are naturally intertwined. Okay, so what we're going to do here is just in Node, using Node, and again, it would be the same logic in Python or Ruby. It would just be like you'd figure out what the libraries are and you'd use them to connect to the database. And the database you're always looking for is what's called a object mapper. So there's document databases, which you would need a object document mapper, an ODM. And then there's relational databases, in which you would need a object relational mapper, an ORM. And there are other databases, and we'll address those as we go along. But let's just start with the basics. Like right now on my computer, I have a Mongo server and I have a Postgres server running. So we're going to see different ways to connect to those two servers. Again, for development purposes, it's probably kind of convenient to install a database server on your computer. That's not what you would deploy with. You would always then have to go get a live database somewhere. So if I were using like MongoDB, I would go to mongodb.com and get a database from them, and that's what I would use when I deploy. If I'm using Postgres, Heroku provides Postgres and MySQL databases for free as a free service. Although, again, if you need bigger, as the database gets bigger, there's bigger tiers that you do pay for. Probably won't get too deep into graph databases, but there is Neo4j Aura, I think it is. And this is like their service that has a free tier to, that's TigerGraph, that's something else. Here we go. Okay, and then this is like their service for providing you a graph database, which maybe I'll do a full video just on this, because this is just like a really cool topic. But also, there's cool like FaunaDB, which is kind of like a mix of everything. Then there's all sorts of really niche, cool DBs, databases. I mean, there's also a dgraph. It's another database that's out there. Oops, I think I just assumed that it was dgraph.com. dgraph. No, I just want to search dgraph. Okay, how about this? dgraph database. There we go. dgraph.io is the website. So it's just another database platform. And generally these like more specialized database platforms like Fauna and dgraph are probably going to have their own libraries for connecting to them. So you may not be using your traditional ORMs like I will be covering. But for like your generic SQL database, your generic MongoDB, that's what we're going to be focusing on in this video. Okay, and there's one more to talk about. Gun.io database. This one's, I haven't actually started using this yet, but this is what I think it is. Is this the right website? Nope, not the right website. Here we go. So the website's gun.echo, and this is like a decentralized database. So it uses the same kind of technology that for like videos, where we can all connect to each other to do like group chats on Zoom and whatnot. It uses that kind of technology to decentralize data. So imagine having a social network where instead of having one central database, like my user data is on my computer, your user data is on your computer, and as we all log in, I'm able to see your data because we're all connected to the network at the same time. That's a really powerful idea, and that's what this Gun database kind of opens up. Which is really cool. If you want to do something really like exciting, this is a technology to do it with. I haven't used it. I have nothing else to say about it. Okay, but now we kind of see the different types of databases. So first we'll do Mongo, because Mongo is generally like the lowest hanging fruit. Like, it's pretty easy to connect to. So I want to open up a new terminal, set up a new node project. So you know the deal, npm init-y. Okay, npm init-y. And just to kind of establish, let's go to npmjs.com. That's where you can see all the different node libraries. To connect to Mongo, you would use an ODM, an object document mapper. And Mongoose is going to be the most used one for Mongo. There are other ones. Okay, so if you look through here, you can find some other ones, and some for other databases like DynamoDB. That's Amazon's kind of document database. Again, this is another Mongo mapper. So you can go through there and see lots of different options. Now, when you're looking here on npm.js, things that are good to pay attention to. One, how recently it was updated. Okay. One, how popular it is. So these bars right here. So the P is for popularity, like how much is it used. Okay. So like, for example, like, let's see if I can find a good, like, for example, like this, that hasn't been updated in 3 years and has no popularity. Probably not a library I want to mess with, as far as if I'm looking to try out something new. Okay, so this, but Monastery, okay, this ODM was updated 4 days ago. It's not that popular, but it was updated recently. It does have like these other bars. I forget what the other bars stand for. So let me just click on that. Okay, and this is another thing that would be a red flag, no documentation. Okay, if I see no documentation, that's going to be something like, I'm just not going to mess with you. There may be documentation on its website, but there's not one here on npm.js. But I can see like, hey, it's downloaded every week. Cool. I also care about like versions. So you see there's been 52 versions. And it's good to know like how old is the oldest version. So also this has been in development for 9 years. That's a good sign. So that there's a recent version and it's been around for a long time. So chances are it's going to be around for a longer time. So like these are the kind of things you want to look at when you're like assessing, do I want to really dedicate? I like to try out like just little libraries all the time, but at the same time you don't want to like invest a lot of time or use something in a production project if you don't think it's going to stick around. So, you know, just some things to kind of look at when you're like looking around here, like is something worth trying or learning? Some just things to look for as like red flags. Okay, like something that's like updated years ago. Again, I would take a look at like, is it still being used? Like, do I still see a lot of downloads for it? Like, if I go back to this ODM package that hasn't been updated in 3 years, do I see any like it's 2 downloads a week and hasn't been updated for 3 years? So no one's using it, and no one's updating it. Not gonna touch it. No offense, Hal Newman, the creator of the library. Cool. Okay. So Mongoose is what we're going to use. Like that's the one. That's the one that everyone uses generally for Mongo. Okay, and then you see like right there with 1.3 million downloads a week. Okay. So I'm going to install it. npm install Mongo. And I'm not going to sit here and do like a bunch of database queries in this particular video. This video is purely just about connecting to the database. So I'm going to just create a mongo.js. Just this is going to be the script for me to connect to Mongo. And so I'll bring in Mongoose. Mongoose equals require Mongoose. Okay, and then what you do is you just do mongoose.connect. That's it. Okay, and then you have to put in the URL. And you'll notice this with across all databases that you connect to them using a URL called the database URI. Okay, and generally it always works off that you put the protocol first. So this is Mongo, so the protocol's MongoDB. Okay, kind of like you would put like HTTP, that's the protocol. And then what we allowed to do is we can put a username and password. Usually would be like username : password. And then what you would do is you would say at the server. So the server is going to be localhost, my computer. And then generally you're going to have the server running on some port on your computer. So by default, if you have a Mongo server installed on your computer and you never configured a port, it's going to be running on 27017. That's the default. And then you do slash, and then generally the name of the database comes next. So I would just say /cheese db. Okay, whatever you want to call it. The only thing I'm going to change here is that I'm not going to use a username and password, because generally when you have a Mongo database running locally, you don't need it. Okay, so I can get rid of that part. So basically I'm connecting to a Mongo server that's on my computer, because that's what localhost is, running on port 27017, and I want to connect to a database called CheeseDB. That's how that URL reads. Now, again, libraries, they change over the years, so there's certain features that have been deprecated. So generally, to avoid any deprecation warnings, we generally pass this object as a second argument that has like use new URL parser. And we make that true. Use, I already did use new URL parser. The other ones I want to say is like use, that'll tell you when I run the server. Okay, and then what I want to do is just make a little message when the server starts. So I do mongoose.on. That allows me to register an event. I'm going to say, hey, when the connection opens, I want to just log the message connected, and then I'll just do another one, mongoose.on. When the connection closes, I want to have a message that says disconnected. Console.log disconnected. Okay, and actually that's going to be mongoose.connection.on. Okay. And then also the mongoose connection object, which represents your connection to the database. Mongoose.connection, that's also where we have the disconnect function. I am pretty sure. Dot disconnect, we'll just do that. Okay, we'll see if that works. Okay, and then I should just run the script. So node mongo.js. Okay. Did I install Mongoose? Is that the problem? Did I forget to install Mongoose? Oh, I installed Mongo. My bad. I need to install Mongoose. Mongo is just like the raw Mongo drivers, which you could also use, but generally you don't want to use the raw drivers because it's just, you have to type a lot more code. Like, it can be good to save performance, but also makes your code base harder to work with. So it's like, there's always this, debate between using just like raw drivers versus an ORM, or a query builder, which is sort of like the in-between, where you can, it's an abstraction, but not too deep an abstraction. So node mongo, oh no, I didn't actually install it yet. npm install mongoose, although I gave it too many O's. npm install mongoose. Okay, now we can run the script, node mongo.js. Yeah, so I figured that was not quite what I was looking for. But now that I've installed it, I should be able to see, like, what's the thing I'm looking for? I think it's actually going to be close, isn't it? Yep, close. That's the function I'm looking for. That'll close the connection. And you see I connected to the database, and then I disconnected to the database. That's pretty much it. Like, I can create this connection, and then you use the connection to work with the database. Okay, now how do you send queries and all this stuff? Not necessarily the topic of this video. The point is like, I could use this in any framework. I just make a file, and then I can connect to the database like this. Like, there's nothing special that has to be done for the particular framework that you're using. Now, how about an SQL database? Okay, there's a couple different options. In this case, you want an ORM, an object relationship mapper. And what is this whole object mapping thing does is that these abstractions, these ODMs, ORMs, what they generally do is they allow you to describe the data in your database into objects through what's called a schema. which is just like saying, okay, hey, every dog has a name and an age. So you're describing like what is the data model. And what it does, it generally creates a class, an object with a bunch of functions that you can use to interact with the database. So if I want to create a dog, there'll be like a function called like dog.create. And that's just a lot more easier to work with, easier to think through. It's a really good application of like object-oriented programming. Probably if I use OOP is where I use OOP the most in working with a database. It just makes thinking through my data and approaching my data a lot easier. So if I look up ORM, okay, you'll see there's a lot of ORMs. I'm going to sort them by popularity. Okay, so I just click on the little popularity button here. Okay, probably the ones I always hear all about all the time are like Sequelize, TypeORM, Bookshelf, Objection. I've used Objection. Then you'll see there's more. We'll try out probably just have time for like Objection and Sequelize, but they'll let you connect to pretty much any SQL database. Depends on. So for example, we go to Objection. Actually, I have the code right here. Okay, first thing we have to do is actually install like the libraries. So Objection is an ORM built on a query builder. So Nex or Connects is a query builder, which means is that it gives you functions not necessarily to map your database to objects. So you don't get to like, hey, there's an object called dog with a bunch of functions for me to add and subtract dogs. Instead, you have functions that allow you to write your code almost like an SQL query without writing an actual SQL query. And the reason why you'd want that is because if you just wrote to write a bunch of strings that were SQL queries in your code, and you were to inject other like inject strings into those strings, you have security issues. So by having a query builder, it gives you just enough of an abstraction to provide you some security, but not so much abstraction that you might be being less efficient than you really need to be. Because oftentimes an ORM, because they don't know exactly what you're trying to query, like they have to try to create an abstraction that can kind of handle whatever situation you throw at it. So oftentimes it ends up creating queries that are not necessarily as efficient as the queries you would make on your own. Okay? Which is why every ORM has escape hatches, where that way if you do need a more efficient query, like you want to write your exact query, you can. They generally have some sort of exec function or something like that. Okay, so that's just, again, the raw drivers, which just means you're just connecting directly to the database, and you're just sending queries as text strings to the database and getting back the data, and it's a lot of work. Query builders, which kind of give you a little bit more language help, but again, not a full-on object mapper. Then you got the object mappers, ORMs, ODMs. So Objection is built on top of Nex. So we have to install both. So we're going to install Nex, K-N-E-X, and Objection. So we install both. Okay, and I'm going to make an objection.js file. Okay, take a look at this code over here. Okay. And the way Objection works is what it does, it allows you to keep Connects and all the really nice features that Connects has. I like Connects. It was actually used in the first job that I had as a developer. But allows you to create the object mappers by having this model class. Okay, so essentially what we want is the model class from the Objection library, and then we bring in Connects from there, because Connects is what actually connects to the database. Objection just allows you to set up a more ORM type feel to it. Okay, and then we connect to the database by creating a new Nex object. So I'll just kind of copy this from here. Although again, this is set up for an SQLite database. So you're saying, say, const connects client SQLite 3. So I would change this to Postgres if I want Postgres. And you fill in the. So this is just saying connection file name example.db. I'm going to assume that it'll actually create the database for me if I don't have it, because that's how SQLite works. So when you're talking about like Postgres and MySQL, they work like most databases where you actually have a server and all the databases are inside this like server. So you have to connect to the server and then say, hey, I want this database on the server. SQLite 3, the way it works, it sets up a database as a single file, and then that file stands alone. So there's no server of databases, it's just a file. It's really good for development. Generally not used for like your actual final deployment, but it's really easy to develop on offline without having to set up a whole like server. So that's the purpose of SQLite 3. So we'll see if that, I'm going to leave it there because I want to see if it actually creates the file. Okay. And then again, what this is doing is that we're generating a new class. So what we're doing is this model.next function, what it does is that the model class takes connects and now knows that this connects object is the connection. Because again, when we created this creates the connection because we're creating this new next object that has all the settings for the database we want to connect to. And you can read the next documentation to see how they connect to different databases like MySQL, Postgres. You just change these settings and to match what they have in their documentation. This connects that connection to the objection model, and then we are able to create our own models from that. Okay, so then I would create my own person model. Okay, so person extends model. Okay, I think I might have forgotten well, there's more to it. So let me just get this whole class here. Okay. And essentially, now I have this connection to the database, and then I'm going to have this person class, and this person class is going to have all the functions for me to like add and subtract to the database. So I could be like person dot select or something. Like let's see here, like probably I can actually see what functions it has. Dot. So you can see here it belongs to one relation, has many relations. Query builder. Okay. Has all these functions built in, and I think actually you say query, I think we do person.query builder, and then that has all like the good methods. Like, yeah, right here we go. So all to get like all of them. Okay, there's a bunch of stuff in there. So that, actually we want to say query dot then. But essentially you would construct the query, but you can construct a query specific for this table, and it just makes life a lot easier in working with Next in a more object-oriented way. But let me just run the file, just see if it like gives me some sort of output that the connection was established. Node objection.js. I got some errors. Let's see why. Cannot find module SQLite 3. Oh, that's right. We have to also install the database driver. So I have to do like npm install, which I think is going to be just called SQLite 3. So you got to install the database driver. So PG for Postgres, MySQL for MySQL. Okay, now if I run the file, node objection.js, and yeah, so it ran the code. It didn't end up creating a database, but I don't think it gets created until you actually run a migration. So you'd actually have to use, and that's the thing, like when you're talking about a SQL database, Mongo just connects right away because it'll create the data for you as it goes. Like you don't have to pre-create the collection to store the data in. It just will make the database if it doesn't exist. It'll make the collection if it doesn't exist. It'll make the data if it doesn't exist. Mongo's really flexible and pliable versus other databases. SQL databases like Postgres, MySQL, SQLite 3, they are much more strict about having structured data, data with a schema. So in that case, you need to describe the data ahead of time. So you actually have to create the database, create the tables, all that stuff before. And usually what you do is you use a feature called migrations. So all of these ORMs have a feature called migrations. In this case, Next has the migration feature. So even though we're using objection as the ORM, it's Next that actually has all the migration features, and you would read the Next documentation for that. I do have some videos on Next, so if you want to see how to do that migration stuff and all that stuff, watch the videos I have on Next for that. I don't want to go too deep. This is just, again, just showing you that giving you the conceptual framework for using these tools. And let's try out Sequelize. Sequelize is like the other super popular one. Okay, so again, basically we have to install the ORM, and then we install database drivers. I already installed SQLite 3, so we'll stick with that. Okay, but npm install Sequelize. Okay, so that's installed or installing. So let's go to their documentation. Okay, and see how you set it up. Okay, so I'll just literally just copy this for the moment. Boop, boop, boop. Okay, and we'll parse it out when we get there. So we'll go to Sequelize, Sequelize.js, and I put this here. So again, I'm importing Sequelize model and data types. We'll see what all that is needed. Then we're importing SQLite memory. So good thing I installed stuff with SQLite. So essentially what this is doing is it's saying create a new SQL database. In this case, is building the SQLite database in memory. Okay, that's what I'm assuming that means. So instead of actually making a file, an SQLite file, it's just going to make a temporary database for as long as the program is running. That's running in the computer's memory. So that's what that's doing. So that's making the connection. And then here's the model. So just kind of like with objection, you extend the model class, which is going to be naturally pick up on the connection. So then we say, hey, we're going to create class extends the model. So we don't have to do anything other than that because the model generally has all the methods built into it. So then user.init, we're going to say, hey, we're initializing the table. So we're saying, hey, and that's why we have the data types, because this is us building the schema. So we're saying every user, so please initialize a table for users, where every user has a username, that's a string, and a birthday, that's a date. Okay, again, the connection is this Sequelize object that we created over here. That's the connection. And the model name is user. Okay, and then that's going to say, okay, create a table for this model using with this database connection. That creates a database connection, and then after that, this is going to connect to the database, and then we create a new user. So see, again, the user class has the functions inside of it. User.create, and I'm able to do that because we already created the table up here. Okay, so that's creating the user, the username Jane Doe, birthday with a date, because again we said data type date, and that's it. So if I run this, it should just console log Jane, the new user. Oops, I actually run the file. So node sequelize.js, and that's what it does. So see, it says like create table if not exists. So see, like it does all the SQL stuff to set up the table, and then it creates the one person. And if I do it again, because the minute that program stops running, the memory cleans itself out, so that database got cleaned out. If I do it again, see, it's ID 1 again, because it's a new database, because it's creating a new database in memory every time we use it. Because since we're using SQLite : memory. So that's another one, but that's basically like you have those two choices, objection or Sequelize, if you want to connect to a SQL database. There's more choices. Okay, so if I go back over here and we keep looking, there's type ORM. If you do TypeScript, if you want to do like your database work in TypeScript, so you're using either FullTS or Nest.js as your backend framework, they're going to already have type ORM built in, but it's the go-to if you want to do like your code in TypeScript and you're doing your backend stuff in TypeScript. Bookshelf I haven't used. Let's take a quick look. But again, we take a look at it. It's public, like it was last updated about a year ago, but let's see how many downloads it gets. Still gets about 80,000 downloads, so it's still used quite a bit. Okay, and let's see how long it's been around. It's been around for 8 years, so it's been around for a while and was updated recently. So I'm assuming it'll probably get, if it needs to be updated again, it will get updated. I don't see any messages here saying it's like deprecated. Okay. This also seems to be built on top of Next. So you can see here, like, see, we create the Next connection, then you connect it to Bookshelf, and now you can create models using Bookshelf. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Okay, then Sails is its own whole framework. So Sails is like, think of it as like Rails, but in JavaScript. Okay, oops, didn't want to go that far. But yeah, this is like a whole deal. So if you want really like a robust, feature-rich framework that has a database stuff built in too, this would be the thing you probably would like to use. Okay, it was last updated 2 months ago. It's been around for a while. Okay, we already did objection, waterline. Again, that's the one that Sails uses. So that's its own custom URL that Sails uses. Prisma is really cool. It's a lot more than just an ORM. it can generate a whole API for you. Okay, can we get the documentation? Prisma docs. Okay. And let's go to the what is Prisma deal. Because Prisma does a whole bunch of stuff. Like basically what you can do is you kind of create you basically use GraphQL in and out, and it will generate like the database for you. It makes life really easy. It's really popular. I haven't used it yet, but I've heard a lot of good things. Let's just see here. Retrieve all users. Prisma.user find many. Let's see here. Import instantiate. Find filter all post. Create a new user, a new post. Using post. Where was that snippet we saw a second ago? Here we go. Okay, so essentially you would create a schema like this. So you see it's like using this sort of like GraphQL like syntax. It's just really cool. Again, you can tell I haven't really used Prisma that much, but I've heard a lot of great things, and how it makes people's lives a lot easier. So definitely a thing that I should play with and make a video on. But there's only so much time in a day. Trying to see if there's any other ones that like stand out to me as ones that people use. Strappy's a headless CMS, pretty cool one. But yeah, and all these other ones seem like they were updated a long time ago, aren't that popular. So here's one that was updated 2 days ago. Define Mongoose models using TypeScript classes. Okay, that's for Mongoose. Cassandra is another type of database, so in case you were using Cassandra database, like here's that it can express Cassandra bindings. Well, let's say I was like using Neo4j actually. Like again, I mentioned like Neo4j Aurora earlier. See, there's like the Neo4j driver, but I'm sure there's like, abstractions built on top of it. So let's see, do they have like, I guess, I don't know what you would call it. Oh, I guess that's what you would call it, a object graph mapper. That would make sense. Okay. So like it exists, and it's from Neo4j themselves. So here you can create, you create your models, and you can just use it like you normally would use a object. So that's cool. That's a thing. I haven't used that yet. I'm gonna actually probably make an effort to use that. And the last thing we'll see here. What am I looking for? FaunaDB. There's the FaunaDB JavaScript driver, and let's just see there's probably other things built for Fauna. So you can see here there's a lot of libraries to help working with Fauna. Point is, like, you can use any database you want in your Node apps. Like, all you have to do is just have the database, and then install the library that connects to the database, do all the connection stuff. Like what I would usually do is just make a dummy project like I just did, and just practice connecting to the database, doing all the database stuff, and then you can just incorporate it into your app afterwards. Like there's nothing special about using it in Express, in Fastify, in Koa. You just create the database object, and then you just use it in your routes, and that's it. That's all. There's no mystery. So hopefully someone stuck around and watched this whole video and found it useful. But hopefully you guys enjoyed that. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.